Welcome to ESPN 580, Orlando's high school football scoreboard show's RPI YouTube channel. I'm Heath Ziglar. You know Baylin Trujillo. Tonight we're going to look at who's in and who's out. The RPI just dropped. Baylin, what are your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts are I'm surprised. Yet again, no surprise there, Heath. Some teams are going down in rankings due to the fact that they have to play certain teams in their district. Some teams are going up based on what they're winning and some upsets maybe around the state. But we're going to get into that, Heath. You're going to do a good job of explaining how that's working, especially with the teams that are having big district matchups this week. So again, let's see how it all plays out.
Yeah, remember, this is the RPI show, so we're really just looking at the RPI numbers. We're going to let the district champions kind of decide that on the field. We're going to talk about the RPI, which determines who gets those coveted wild card spots. A lot of teams that are right on the bubble. We're going to get into those. So if you're a Central Florida local team, this is the show to find out where you stand. Let's start with 8A Region 1. Before we get into the RPI points, we want to thank Graffiti Junction for having us in today. They always bring out a couple new menu items for us to try, so hats off to Graffiti Junction for having us in. Yes. Thank you. What a great sponsor. On to Region 1, Class 8A classification. Seminole High School is your number one team. Number one in the state, number one in the region. They've been 8-0. They've handled their road test the last 2 weeks. They're well deserving of the number one spot. This team also is in our personal rankings at number 2 in the local market. So also in the local market in the area for this Region 1 is Apopka High School sitting at number 3.
Yep.
DeLand High School is in at number 5. Timber Creek at number 6. Surprising story with Timber Creek. They started out the RPI at the number 8 spot, then the 7. Now they're sitting at the number 6 spot. They have the big district championship this week against Winter Park High School, who's actually also in our RPI at number 8. For the first time, they're in at number 8. Baylin, that matchup there is going to obviously determine your district champion, who definitely gets in the playoffs. But I want to talk about the team right behind Winter Park.
Yes.
I know you know this team well. This is the defending state champions from up in Jacksonville. Mandarin. Jacksonville Mandarin is actually in the 9 spot right now on the outside looking in. What are your thoughts with them getting one of these spots? Because they have not cracked into the RPI yet.
Right. Well, Mandarin, again, as we know, they're the defending state champions, so they had a lot of pressure this year. I know that they're everybody's state championship game this season, so they are having a pretty rough year as far as the expectations that we thought they were going to have. But they're right there at the number 9 spot. A couple wins away. They got a game this week and the following, and you never know how that's going to work. But like we mentioned, Heath, right under them is a team that we're going to be talking about a lot this week, Lake Mary. Yeah. Lake Mary's at the 10 spot. And Heath, we were so big on them and that whole district at the beginning of the year that we even said that 2 teams from that district, in our opinions, are going to get into the state playoffs. So I think that if Lake Mary was to somehow beat Apopka and win the district championship this week, I believe both Lake Mary and Apopka will go to the state playoffs, which will ultimately knock out a Timber Creek or a Winter Park, depending on who wins the district championship in that. But let's say that Lake Mary does end up losing to Apopka. I believe that either Winter Park or Timber Creek's going to get out of the playoffs, and then Mandarin's going to jump right into that 8th spot, because I do not see 2 teams from that district going on. But Heath, before we go on to Region 2, I think you have something to say about that whole Winter Park situation.
So before we go on to Region 2, like Baylin said, I want to just talk a little bit about the RPI and kind of some things that Baylin and I have noticed that don't make a lot of sense to us, and we kind of just want to share it with you. Winter Park last week was at .597. They went on the road. They beat Colonial by
70-14.
Yeah, they beat them handedly. And this week their RPI is .596. So even though they got better in their winning percentage column, their other 2 columns, opponents' winning percentage and opponents' winning percentage, went down. And because that's 65% of your RPI, we actually saw an example, Baylin, of where a team can go play a state-mandated game in a district game.
That they have to
play, go on the road, get the W, but their RPI points actually go down. So to me, it just shows that the state is placing a lot more value on who you play as opposed to wins and losses. We've seen this example kind of earlier in the RPI. We talked about Tampa Plant.
Yeah,
they were sitting at 1-6, I believe, at the time.
Yep.
But because they had
spots away from making the playoffs.
But because they had such high opponents' winning percentage, they were able to actually be in the RPI conversation. And when we get to that region, we'll certainly look into them. But I just wanted to point out to you guys and the listeners and the viewers here that RPI has some problems, and the fact that Winter Park went on the road and beat a team and beat them badly and go down in the RPI, it shows to me that before those kids, those young men and those coaches got on the bus, they were going to fall in the RPI no matter what they did. Now, if they would have lost, they would have fallen even more. Yeah. But the fact that they won and that their prize for winning is, hey, well, you didn't move down that far. That just to me shows the hypocrisy and kind of the problems with the RPI currently. Now, I'm not saying the system is completely flawed. It maybe works for some teams and not other teams. Okay, so this is just one example I wanted to point out where Winter Park High School actually has a lower RPI in week 3 of RPI than week 2, even though they won in that week. Before we do Region 2, I want to thank Graffiti Junction for letting us try their new sliders. These are new menu items they just got. I've got the beef ones. He's got the chicken ones. Check them out at any Graffiti Junction location. They're part of the new menu items, and they're delicious, man. Check them out.
Thank you, Graffiti.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I want to move on to Region 2 here, Baylin, and no surprise here, in the local market, the number 2 team in the region sitting at the 2nd seed is DP. So Dr. Phillips is going to be in at the 2 seed. Osceola's in at the number 5 seed. But now here's where it gets interesting, Baylin. For the first time ever, breaking into the top 8 in the region is going to be Lake Nona High School.
Wow.
I know Coach Paradiso's got to feel good about that. Now, what are your thoughts here? They've got the big game against Osceola this week.
Yeah, district championship. Yeah.
Now, you had a point you just made to me off the camera. If they win this game, they're obviously in. If they lose it, are they in?
I think they're still in. Based off the RPI points and strength of schedule, I believe even with a loss to Osceola, based off the looks of it, they're going to also make that wild card spot and have a big opportunity of making the playoffs still, even with the loss like we just mentioned. I still think that's a toss-up game. I think Osceola is going to be the big dogs in it, but Lake Nona still has an opportunity because they're playing at such a good Osceola team who have beaten good teams on the road like Manatee last week, and also their RPI points. I think that Lake Nona still sits at that number 8 spot even with a loss, because right behind them is a team that we just talked about, Heath, and Plant. They are 2-6 football team.
2-6.
Like I said, they have the opportunity to be talked about right now just because of the RPI points and their opponents, and even the opponents that they've lost to this season. So with that being said, I still think that Lake Nona gets that 8th spot, but you never know. Like I said, these RPI points based off the flaws of the system, I think that maybe a loss to Osceola this week, we find Plant at number 8 and maybe 3-7 or 4-6 in the playoffs.
I think your first thought was correct. I think Lake Nona finds a way to get in because their game with Osceola is going to help them in those other categories. So in other words, the exact opposite of what happened to Winter Park when they played Colonial.
Right.
So I think that they'll get that boost that they need to improve their RPI, even if they do lose. But obviously, we wish both teams the best of luck.
Yeah.
So that's going to wrap up Region 2, but I'll recap it for you real quick. Dr. Phillips in at number 2, Osceola at 5, and Lake Nona in at number 8. And then we have Tampa Plant, who's just kind of
right there
hanging around with 2 wins right now in the number 9 spot. And that just kind of shows you the RPI's flaws, possibly. So let's move on to 7A Region 1. Okay, Baylin, at the top of Region 1 in Class 7A is no surprise, Edgewater High School. They've been at the top of this region since day one.
And our rankings every week.
Yeah, they're sitting 7-1. Just something interesting to think about here. Niceville High School is the number 2 team. They're 9-0. But because Edgewater took on some games this year, like Godby, Marietta, they have such a high opponents winning percentage. Jones. And opponents winning percentage, because they have such a high category of teams that they play at a high caliber. They are the number 1 team, even though we have Niceville sitting at 9-0 undefeated. So that just shows you a little bit more about how this RPI works.
Yeah.
So Edgewater is the number 1 team in the area, in that region. Number 4 team in the area is actually another team in that same district, Wekiva High School.
Yeah.
So it looks like, as of right now, if the playoffs were to begin, both
teams.
Edgewater and Wekiva are still going to get in, and I think that's 100% correct and deservingly so.
Yep.
That's why I think that's when the RPI, I feel like, is doing its job by getting Wekiva in. No other local teams are currently inside the top 8, but Baylin, I want to talk about a couple teams that I know you know very well. East River and Lake Howell on the outside looking in. We have the Winter Springs game against East River this weekend.
It's a big one.
Talk to me about the storylines that are going to develop this Friday.
Yeah, so this Friday, obviously, we have the big district championship matchup for Winter Springs High School. So if they win, they're in no matter what. They win the district, they solidified their playoff spot, they're in. Right now, if you look at the rankings, I'll be honest with you, Heath, Winter Springs is not even nowhere on the page. They're right towards the bottom. Unfortunately, they don't have such a strength schedule, and their opponents aren't winning much games, just like Lake Howell and East River combined as well. But East River and Lake Howell have a tougher schedule, which is why they're at the number 10 and 11 spot, which is very important. Why, Heath? Because this Friday night, if for some reason East River beats Winter Springs, now we're looking at a conversation which is Lake Howell and East River to winning a district championship. If Lake Howell somehow takes care of business against Lyman, who have played tough opponents like East River and Winter Springs, only lost by 1 point to both those schools, it's going to be interesting. Based off what I'm seeing here, Heath, it looks like Lake Howell would end up with the RPI based off the strength of schedule, ending the season on a good Orange City team. But like I said, Lake Howell has to win on Friday night. East River has to win. But none of this conversation means anything if Winter Springs, who's at the bottom, wins, and then they outright win the district.
Yeah, and what you said there about Winter Springs being so low in RPI, unfortunately, if they win, they actually bump out one of the teams.
Yeah.
So the team, there would only actually be 7 teams really in the RPI conversation for 7A Region 1, because Winter Springs would be contributing to that 8 teams in the region, but they'd be outside of the RPI magic number. So best of luck to all teams this weekend. It should be interesting because that district really has some crazy storylines. Stay tuned to find out more on that. Let's move on to Region 2. At the top of Region 2, once again, no surprise here, Lakeland High School.
Best team, in my opinion, in the entire state.
Probably the best team in all of Florida, with any class. Lakeland High School's at the top there. In terms of some local teams, there's not a lot here, but I want to mention Vieira and Melbourne.
Big district championship game this week.
That's right. They played this week. The winner of that game obviously gets the automatic bid. The loser of that game will likely be able to still get in on RPI. We'll see how that plays out and keep you up to date on that.
Yeah.
Another local team that we've talked about, Baylin, St. Cloud.
Yeah, Brian Yasser's their number 9.
St. Cloud, I know that they were kind of found out when they played Osceola, right?
Yeah, they've lost 3 straight games since the Osceola game. They kind of got exposed a little bit.
But the good thing is they're right there still.
They're number 9.
Okay, if I have to put you on the spot here, are they getting in or not?
They are not.
They're not getting in. Okay,
sorry.
So that you heard it here first. Nothing against St. Cloud, but it's going to be tough.
Nothing against them. It's just
you got to win your next 2 games if you have a shot. But you're right there at number 9, and the magic number is kind of 8 to get a wild card spot.
Yeah, I do believe that the loser of the Vieira Melbourne game still gets in. So.
I do too, and I think that's actually going to be a spot they're going to take up a spot that maybe St. Cloud.
St. Cloud, you had a good year. You started off 5-0. We talked about you for a while there, but 3 straight losses, and they've been bad losses. Just finish strong this year, boys.
All right, let's go take a look at some other regions. So we're going to take a quick look at 6A Region 1, just because it has a couple teams that are in our area. Mainland High School is actually in right now at number 7 spot. I see them still getting in no matter what because of their district.
So too,
but there's another team in their district that's in the number 9 spot. That's New Smyrna Beach High School. So they're kind of right there on the bubble of could they get an RPI wildcard spot or not. It's going to be really, really close for them.
I don't see it happening.
Them losing last week to Mainland obviously kind of effectively ended their district championship and automatic berth hopes. So they really need to win their next 2 weeks and just kind of hope that they get in on one of those 4 RPI spots. So just to recap a little bit of 6A Region 1, Mainland High School is going to be the team that is probably going to represent 6A for the local market. And New Smyrna Beach is the one team that kind of has a shot.
Right now.
Okay, let's quickly take a look at 5A Region 2. No surprise here at the top of that list is going to be Jones High School right here in downtown Orlando. There's another team in that district, though, Baylin, that is making a great case for an RPI wildcard spot. Baylin, who am I talking about?
At number 5, we have Bishop Moore High School. Both those teams are in the same district as Jones and Bishop Moore. I believe Bishop Moore has ended the season on a really high note. They're blowing teams out, even though that means absolutely nothing with RPI. They're just getting a lot of momentum going into the playoffs. I do believe both those teams go into the state playoffs. Jones High School obviously is a team that I've been talking about highly with Coach Elijah Williams. You know, they're dominating. I don't see them losing at 7-1. They had a really phenomenal year. So again, both those teams I believe are going to the states.
Yeah, Bishop Moore has made all the case in the world for why they deserve a RPI wildcard spot. I bet they get it.
Yeah.
Jones is going to obviously, I think, keep that number 1 spot throughout the region. That'll do it for 5A2. Let's take a look at some of the smaller conferences. Okay, Baylin, let's take a quick look at 4A Region 2. The reason we want to take a look here is no surprise at who's the top of Region 2. That's Cocoa High School. Since they dropped down to 4A, Baylin, you've been saying all year long, this is a state championship caliber team. I don't see them losing that number 1 spot in their region going into the playoffs. So they're going to have home field throughout their region, and that bodes well for Cocoa. I don't think they've lost a game at home this year.
No, they haven't. And Heath, like I said last week, they're going to the state championship. Yeah, they did lose a pretty ugly loss last week to Venice in the pouring down rain, which we all consider a big tropical storm on the West Coast, but I don't see them losing nowhere even close on any of the teams in 4A right now. I think they're going to go to the state championship. I'm not saying they're going to win the state championship, even though if I had to predict, but I think they make a case walking through that whole district or that whole region.
Yeah, so Cocoa High School, you sit at the top of your region, you're comfortably inside. The final group we're going to talk about tonight is 3A Region 2, and the reason we wanted to mention them is there's a team here in Orlando we've actually kind of overlooked in the RPI the past couple weeks, so we want to give a little love to the First Academy for being in at the 3 spot. We haven't seen a lot of their games personally this year, but our hats are off to First Academy, so a lot of love from the ESPN team.
Looks like they're in.
For you guys being inside the top 6. All right, Baylin, so I think that's going to do it for the RPI show number 3. But now we have a live show this week at 7 o'clock on Thursday night on ESPN Radio. Baylin, that's going to be a big one.
I'm telling you right now, Heath, this is the most important week of high school football. After Friday night, we're going to see who has solidified themselves in the Final 8 by being district champions. We're also going to know that some of the teams that are on the wild card spot to make into the Final 8. Heath, I'm telling you right now, people don't know this. They're going to know it now by watching this. High school football's most important week is this week, this Friday night. So I hope you choose the right game to go to. Heath, I know we're going to talk about the different games we're going to go to, which we're going to release on Thursday in our show. But Heath, what a great show today was.
Okay, this guy's fired up. I'm fired up too. That show is going to be Thursday night at 7 o'clock on ESPN 580 Orlando. For Graffiti Junction, we want to thank them for all the food they provided us in sponsoring this show. For Heath Ziglar, Baylin Trujillo, we're out. Okay, good.